on the cloud.
There we go. Got
There
it.
we go. All right, got it. Let's share my screen. Now we will get started. Okay. Play from the start. Okay. So welcome everybody. I just want to let you know a little how this came about. As StarNet, you know, our new focus has been on working with everybody who has children that are blended in your classroom and helping make sure that those children are active members of your classroom, and also supporting you so you can best serve the children of all abilities in your classroom. So the biggest thing I saw is many times they say, okay, we're going to blend, here's this kid, and maybe we're not prepared and we don't know how to really help this child. We cannot help or teach anybody until we really can engage the child. So that's where this webinar all came out. That's how it all started. So I just want to start by reviewing the DEC recommended practices that I'll be focusing on. I feel like I have things popping up all over the slides. So this first one is just that we use systematic instruction to teach with fidelity, right? In order to promote that engagement. And again, just think back to my beginning slide, right? I can't teach a child anything unless I can engage that child and make a connection with that child. And the other one I'll be focusing on is E1, that we provide services and supports in natural, inclusive environments during daily routines, right? It's not necessary to pull the child. Sometimes maybe we need a short little lesson to teach them. It's not necessary. We can do it in the classroom with the other children, and that's really best for all children. And then I feel like a lot of you have seen this already, but once again, I'm Becky Handler. I used to be the youngest in StarNet and the new person. Currently, I think I'm the old, well, I'm not the oldest, but I've been there for a very long time. I'm married, I have a son and a daughter. My son got married this summer, almost a year, at the end of May, it'll be a year, I can't believe it. He moved to Florida, and my daughter lives in Philadelphia, where I am from. I love being outside. Didn't we all love last week when it was beautiful and 80? And yesterday was like, ah. And then some of my best friends are my college friends. I went to Syracuse University. We did lose one of our friends, but we have now become the mother to the youngest child of my little Syracuse group. And this was last year, we went to her mom's weekend at University of Illinois. So that's Becky in a nutshell. Just to let you know, we're going to do we will be chatting. As long as there's time, we're going to go to 2 short breakout rooms and participate in the breakout rooms, because I think sometimes they're some of the most beneficial time. Before we really get into engagement, this was it's old already, it's from Aaron Barton and Barbara Smith from June of 2014. And they just said these things, and I'm going to read them because I think they're important to keep in your mind. Inclusion benefits all children with and without disabilities. Many studies have shown this already. Children with disabilities can be effectively educated in inclusive programs using specialized instruction. And I don't know if anyone is participating in the Aaron Barton webinar series that Choices is putting on. And she said something great yesterday. We all know the saying that the children don't need to be ready to be included. What needs to be ready is the classroom and the teacher, meaning that you guys need to have the proper training to be prepared to teach and engage with this child. Parents and teachers influence children's values regarding disabilities. We know that also. My daughter Dana, that she's a child life specialist. She talks about in all her interviews for grad school, she talked about how when she was young, if there was a child that looked different or a child in a wheelchair, I would stop and I would engage. And she never felt any fear seeing someone that was different because I made it such a natural part of their growing up lives. Really important, individualized embedded instruction can be used to teach a variety of skills related to our early learning standards. And this embedded instruction is really going to promote participation for all children with and without disabilities. So when I talk about embedded instruction, that's a whole nother webinar, which is up on the YouTube channel. That's really knowing the child's goal, being specific, knowing, okay, they go to the kitchen every day. How can I set up the kitchen environment so I can have the child demonstrate knowledge of a goal that they're working on? And I'm going to maybe repeat something 2-3 times so I can collect data and see how the child's doing with that. This is important. Families of children with and without disabilities generally have a positive view about inclusion. The other thing is inclusion is not more expensive. Having separate classrooms is more expensive. And then this is, I guess I already said this line, right? That they don't have to be ready. We just need to be ready to support those kids. And I think that that's a really important food for thought, as I like to say. These are just a few, again, to think about. Inclusion is not simply about the physical proximity. It's about intentionally planning for the success of all students, okay? So it's not enough for a program to say, yes, we're blending, and you guys are the teachers, and here are the 3 kids with IEPs that are gonna be in your classroom. No, you need to know about those kids. You need to know what program they're in. You need to know what their strengths are. You need to know their areas of needs. What did last year's teacher find out the best way to approach them? So I thought that that was really important. I like this one also. Inclusive education, believe in valuing students' differences. I have stuff all over. And supporting their learning needs to the greatest extent possible. Okay, so I just feel like we have to believe in this kind of stuff in order to really make blending, inclusion, whatever you want to call it, successful. So I'm going to talk about 2 types of engagement today. The first type of engagement I'm going to talk about is, we do this a lot in the beginning of the year. It's making that connection with the child. You're engaging with that child so you can find out stuff about that child. You can find out that child's strengths, their needs, their likes, their dislikes. If you don't have that initial one-on-one contact, and it might take a bit of time, it's really hard to know where to start. So there's this nice little cycle I'm going to talk about that engagement. Yes, okay, it's the end of the year, so this is good information for the start of the year, but you guys know you get kids all year round, right? So you might be doing this with a lot of kids in September, but maybe you get a kid in November and you're spending a little time with this one child. The second part of the webinar is talking about the engagement that you're probably more familiar with, and that is, how do you engage a child in an activity to make them an active participant in the class? So sort of my soapbox this year is, it's not enough to set up 3 cube chairs in the back of the classroom and say these kids are included, right? And have a one-on-one sitting by them, entertaining them. No, we want them to be active participants in all activities. So how can you engage them to meet their needs so they can be active participants in your classroom? So I want to start with a video, and I'm going to stop sharing because it never works when I share in there. And here is my video. This is a little bit something different. Oh, wait, I need to share this. Hold on. What am I doing? 1 second. Okay. Share screen. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here today. Sorry, hold on a second. I had this all minimized. Okay, I'm going to try it this way. Can you see my screen now? Marianne?
Yes, Beck, I can.
Okay, so let's see. No, what am I doing wrong? Oh, I know. Okay. I'm sorry. End the show. Okay. Minimize that. And pull up this. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, finally. Do you see this transforming inclusive education, Marianne?
Yes.
Okay. And can you hear it?
Shelley Moore.
Yes.
I'm a
Okay.
PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregates students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be philosophically versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we can have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling. And let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this. So I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to, the kids with autism, kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with Universal Design for Learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim.
Okay. So just what are your thoughts? If you want to put something in the chat, do you think you were one of the 7-10 kids? I heard this video in a webinar that I attended, and it really, really struck me. Even if you think of your family member or family get-togethers, right? That one relative that was always on the outskirts. Yeah, makes a lot of sense, right? So we are trained and we think, right, when we're planning, we think about those middle kids. But what if we shift our mind and think about those outliers and start there, right? And then we can get the kids in the middle. So I used to do this, yeah, great analogy. That's how I felt. It really struck me, this short video. And I used to do this thing in the creative curriculum training where it would ask you to list all the kids in your class. And actually, the kids that you would write first were actually those 7-10 kids. You think of the behavior problem, the kid that won't play. Okay, so we do think about those kids, but we don't start our planning with those kids. So hold that analogy in your mind, just like I did. And I think that it really, you could have a mindset shift. All right, so one more chat. When I say engagement, you say, what do you think of when I say engagement? What does it look like in your classroom? If I walked in and I said, wow, those kids are engaging, what would your kids be doing? Just in a few, or if anyone wants to unmute, participating, okay? Hands-on activities, eating snack, okay? Participating, enjoying. Yeah, Lauren, we don't just want them participating, we want them enjoying, actively doing the activities, working together. Great, participating. Right, if I'm not engaged, I am not participating. I am not interacting with others. All kids are playing, participating in something, various things, and having a good time. Yes, thank you, exactly. So, think about that, interacting. Sometimes I wish, and I think you have the time, we think we don't, but send your kids to centers. And I talk about centers just because, right, that's our biggest chunk of time. And that is where kids get lost. That is where our 7-10 kids sometimes are not engaged and we're not pulling them in. But take the time after a couple minutes and just stand back and survey your room. Okay, and look at the kids that aren't participating. And the reason I say to take a little time, and actually Jennifer, one of our participants, I was in her classroom in the beginning of the year, and there was a little boy. She sent the kids off to centers. Most kids got engaged very quickly, but there was a little boy kind of walking around the center of her classroom, kind of talking to himself. He would go over to a table, might pick up a toy, walked away. And I was about to write a note saying, okay, we need to watch him. But after a couple minutes, this boy made a choice and he sat down, and I think he started to play a game with someone. So he was a kid that just needed a little bit more time. So I might not get engaged right away. Maybe I need a little time, and especially since it's right, first thing in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. But step back, and after centers has started, even 10 minutes, take a look. Who is that kid that isn't doing anything still? And that's the kid that we need to focus on. That's our 7-10 pin child. So this is from Unpacking the Pyramid, from the pyramid model, and I really like this. Children who are engaged in routines and activities, that's our 2.5 hours of preschool, in their classroom directly affects the learning opportunities and therefore their learning outcomes. So if we're so concerned about collecting our gold data or whatever you're doing, I have to be engaged in order for you to show that I'm learning and that you can show progress is happening in your class. So that's why I really want you to take that time to step back, because sometimes when we get so involved, because you guys are, I used to do a presentation that I had like the teacher spinning 12 plates, right? You're doing 15 things at one time that you might not notice that quiet child that's just sitting there and not engaged. And you talked about what you want to see the children doing. So take the time to step back, because without being engaged, I'm not going to have learning opportunities that you've set up, and you're not going to see learning outcomes. So this goes back to, I'm sure you've heard this a lot. This was from NAEYC, and this is how we make sure that children are engaged in our classrooms. We have to have 3 things going on in all classes that have inclusion. And really, when I say this is a lot of what Eckers is saying also, right? First of all, there has to be access for me, meaning all children should be able to access a broad range of learning activities. So when, Eckers, we talk about access, like, can I independently open the box? Can I independently paint at the easels? But I'm talking about if I am at a lower level, if I am only at an 18-month level and I'm in your classroom, are there PEG puzzles? So when I go over to fine motor to puzzle area, like, are there puzzles that I can even do? I can't be engaged if it's developmentally too high for me. So there has to be the right materials out for me. Having a disability shouldn't limit or shouldn't limit my ability to have access to be engaged in the classroom. Then we talk about participation, the extent to which children with special needs have meaningful opportunities to engage and to be engaged in the classroom activities. And the only way those activities can be meaningful is if you have pre-planned. You have said, Becky likes to go to the block area every day, and Becky loves trains. So I'm going to add a few trains, and maybe I can engage her to start by making a train station. Okay. Otherwise, I might just go to the block area and sit in the block area. So you're thinking about, how am I going to set up my classroom so that child can really participate? And then finally, the support has to be in place, right? And we have lots of supports in place for all children in our classroom. Our schedules, our visuals, our routines, even setting up the children know when I have my, I have people coming and knocking on my door right now, and I'm going to ignore them. You know, when you have 4 little Velcro dots at your centers, and I know how many kids can go to that center. Okay, that's giving all kids support. But again, I'm going to keep talking about my 7-10 kids. What more do those 7-10 kids need? So I can be engaged, and remember, engaged leads to learning. So I have to have access, participation, and support. So the next few slides are going to just address some basic strategies that we really should be using in all of our classrooms. And this is universal design. It is nothing new, but it's one of those cyclical things, right? So I think when I was in the classroom, we were talking about universal design. Maybe we're not talking about it so much right now, but it's such a basic thing. It's nothing new. It's in NAEYC's and DEC recommended practices. It's in NAEYC's DAP position statement, but UDL, or Universal Design for Living, makes sure the curriculum is accessible for all. And it shifts our focus away from reacting to the problem. So this kid's in my class and he's stimming and he doesn't play with any toys, but instead of saying that, to making adaptations. So this kid is in my class. This is what this kid does. What adaptations can I start making in the classroom so we can help this child be engaged and learn? And how do they do this? UDL includes the use of a variety of flexible curriculum and materials used to help students achieve learning goals. So again, you're already doing this, but I like this. There's 3 parts to universal design. We have engagement, we have representation, and we have action and expression. So when we talk about multiple means of engagement, that's kind of the why of learning. So how can students be motivated and engaged with their curriculum? So I hold a fidget maybe so I can focus better, or I have an individual schedule so I know what's going to happen during large group. That's how you're going to keep me, Becky, engaged. The kid next to me is probably fine with you just saying and next, or holding up a few visuals. But to keep me engaged, these are the things I need. Multiple means of representation talks about the what in learning. So how that student, how are they going to acquire the curriculum? What do you have to do so they can learn and make progress with the curriculum that you're using? So maybe I need an adaptive book so I can follow along. Or I let children answer visually or verbally. I went into a grade classroom where she had a little chart during large group, and it was like, do you want to tell me, show me, or I can't remember the third. So she gave the children 3 ways for them to communicate and answer. I think it was the good morning or hello or whatever. And then finally, action and expression is sort of the how of learning. So I have a PEX board so I can communicate to you, okay? Because otherwise I can't show you if I can learn if I can't speak. and I've talked about this a lot. Many times we have, the speech pathologist might give us some visuals to use during centers, but then during large group, but then I go to centers and I don't have those visuals, and how am I supposed to communicate? So this is, again, I said nothing new, but think about this. How is that kid, what can I do so that kid can be engaged? How am I representing what it is they have to learn? And how are they learning it? How can they show me that they're learning it? But of course, I want to focus a little bit more on the engagement part. So I have to have multiple means of engagement. We know that children learn through play, and new knowledge is acquired by playing with different peers and experimenting with different materials. So I want to make sure I expose children to that. Some kids just can't sit at circle time the whole time. So that would be okay. But what is my plan if that kid can't sit at circle time? So it doesn't mean that they have free roam of the room. Maybe there's one activity that child's going to do. I had a little boy who had autism. He had two choices. He was allowed to cut paper and watch it fall, or he was allowed to color with crayons. But that area was set up for him. But here's the thing. He wasn't just allowed to never come. We started him, this was actually at math group. This was for kindergarten age kids. So we started him in his small group. We knew how long, we had tracked this. We knew how long he could sit and be engaged. After, it was a short time, after 3 minutes at the beginning of the year, that was all he could handle. So he got up, he was allowed to leave, but we worked on extending that time, right? Once you let them go over and do their thing, it's a little harder to pull them back, and then they've missed some of the stuff. But we worked on extending the time as the year went on. I don't think we ever got him to sit for the full maybe 20 minutes, but I did definitely get him to sit for at least half of it. So it was conscious, it was planned. We thought about how we were going to get him engaged, and I don't remember what, but I definitely used his preference, what he liked, to get him back engaged. So I think actually if the kids were using pencils, he was using a crayon because he really liked crayons. The other thing to think about is I'm missing engagement time if I'm constantly being pulled by related services. So I don't know if anyone is related services here, and this is a whole nother webinar, but it's hard to be engaged in the classroom if I'm being pulled for speech and then 20 minutes later, or a half hour later, I'm being pulled for OT. It's much better and much easier, and much, as the related services, you should be offering suggestions to the teacher how the child, what they can do to help that child be more engaged in the classroom, right? So as a speech pathologist, you would see, well, he can't even communicate very well when he's a dramatic play. He's just doing his own thing because he doesn't have the words. But maybe I could make him some kind of visuals that he could use, and then he could communicate better. What's the name of the webinar? That webinar, and I think, but I could be lying, could be on YouTube. That's called Therapy Does Not Belong in the Broom Closet, It Belongs in the Classroom. It's something like that. But I do that one a lot. So, okay, multiple means of engagement. You want to look at, working with different peers, working with different materials, looking at the different types of support that the child needs. And again, yes, it's a lot in the beginning of the year, but if you start in the beginning of the year with this, things will be a lot easier. Okay, the other thing that Universal Design talks about is there's 3 types of learning environment. And I think that we spend a lot of time looking at the physical environment, which isn't bad. We need to. So that's looking at, again, think about engagement. And if I'm looking at the physical environment, is it set up? So not just is it accessible, but if I have any kind of walker, maybe you need a few less centers, or things are going to be a little smaller, so there is more space for that child to get around and to access everything. You know, something on the low shelf, can that child get that? These are things, these are kind of physical things I would think of before that child even comes in. We already look at this. We look at, Eckers tells us to have quiet and active centers separated, right? So if I'm a kid that gets overstimulated, there needs to be that quiet. Maybe I'm only on the quiet side of activities because that's the way, that's the best way I can be engaged. The other thing, which I think we're getting better at, is looking at your social emotional environment. Why does Eckers tell us to have that cozy corner, right? We all have like bad days. We all go to work not in a great mood, right? You fought with your child, you fought with your husband, whatever. You put on your pants, they were too tight. So what is in your environment that supports you, right? Do you get to work and you have a nice cup of coffee? Do you get to work and your best coworker is there? So how are we setting up our social emotional for the kids? We have cozy corners. Am I rattled when I get off the bus? Do you meet me at the bus with a feeling chart and I let you know right away what my morning was like? So take a look at your social emotional environment. How are you setting that up to help children to learn to interact, right? So let them know how they're doing, or they let you know when they need some kind of break. The final one, which again, I think we could be a little bit better at as time, is our temporal environment. And what that is the management of daily structures of routines, activities, and transition. And this is such a soapbox of mine, that daily schedule. Most people have a schedule posted, but having a schedule posted and not using it does nothing, okay? If I am so worried about what is coming next, I might not be able to engage because my anxiety is so high. I don't know the routine yet, or routines are hard for me. But if you had a schedule and you said, first we're doing circle, and then we're going to pick what center before circle even started, then I don't have to spend circle all anxious about what's coming next. Or if you tell me 4 more things and then I go home and see mom, because I'm a 3-year-old and this is the first time I've been on a big yellow bus in the beginning of the year, and I don't even understand what this early childhood classroom is all about. So think about, keep this in mind and go back to that, okay? When you're working with, I don't even want to say now when we're having trouble with, but when you're working with our 7-10 split child, your physical environment is probably, we're pretty good at that. But look again, do they have access and support, and are they able to participate? But look at your social emotional environment. What else do you need to add to that? Do you need to spend some time in the beginning of the year really talking about social emotional stuff so kids know how to use the emotion chart, so they know how to use the cozy corner? And then look at your temporal environment. How am I really working on, do I stick to routines, right? We all like our routine. We all have a morning routine. And I don't know about you guys, but when my morning routine gets messed up, things aren't good for me, okay? So look at your routines. Do you stick to your routines? Do you give kids clear transitions? That's another big one, okay? Do I have warning that something's going to end, and do I know what's happening next? Or do you just say clean up, but I don't know what I'm doing after I clean up? So think about those 3 things as you are setting up your classroom. I guess I'm really talking about next year. Okay, so now we're going to make my shift. I guess that was my introduction. Now we're going to make this shift into this first type of engagement, and that's building that bond with the student, okay? And this comes from the book, Including One, Including All. I did not invent this, but this is a cycle. It's called the Engage, Reflect, Plan cycle. It's pretty basic, but again, because you guys are so busy, I feel like we don't always get to do the whole cycle. It's continuous. What we're doing is we're finding ways to engage with a child. We reflect how that went, And then what we're planning for is we're planning for the next stages for engagement. That all this is, this cycle is not planning for teaching or the lesson per se. This cycle is when I engage with this child, what am I learning? Let me reflect on that. Okay. What can I plan to maybe engage a bit more and create a stronger bond with this child? Because we all know you have to have a bond and a connection with a child in order to reach them and to start teaching with them. And the point that I want to make is I'm not asking you to do this with all 39 children in your classroom. I'm asking you to do this again with our 7-10 kids, okay? Your 3, your 4, your 5 IEP kids. That you really have to establish this bond so we can then start teaching them in the way that they need to be taught. Okay, so any questions? Well, I guess I'm just kind of getting into it, but. Okay, first step is engaging, and this is knowing each child in detail, okay? It's also establishing trust with a child and then following the child's lead as they're playing. So in the beginning of the year or when you get a new child, I don't want you to worry, easier said than done, about all the other stuff that you need to be doing during centers, okay? But I want you to say, this is most important, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 5 minutes to sit down and play individually with this child. So if you could for a second, I know you have all done this, you just haven't called it this cycle, or maybe you haven't completed the cycle. Go ahead and chat one thing you learned when you played individually with a child, something you learned about that child. So kind of an aha moment when you took the time to play individually. How they were feeling. Okay, their cutting skills, their play skills. Learned about their family, great. The strengths, their interests out of school, perfect. Their feelings and their family, their skills. They enjoyed the attention, nice. So we know just by taking that short, their fears, okay, their sense of humor. How much they know, because usually quiet and peers talk for them. Right, so that quiet child might know so much more, but everybody is talking for them. And then, right, Mary Jo, you said building relationships, right? This is what this is all about. We're starting by establishing a relationship. And the biggest thing is we're letting that child know we're accepting them where they are. So if that child is just sitting on a chair, I'm going to sit down next to them on a chair, and starting to talk to them. Rebecca, that's fine. Marianne will let you back in. You're following the child's lead. So again, remember, this engagement is not to teach the child anything right now. This engagement is to create a bond with that child. So you're only following the child's lead and playing how they're playing right now. And by following their leads, you're showing them that I'm a playmate with you. So maybe a child with autism is in your block center, and as we know, they're just taking the car and pushing it back and forth. So just to get their attention, maybe you take a car and you push it back and forth also. You might add some words to it. You might say, my car is going to go park. Then you say, I need to build a garage for my car. Now, granted, will the child follow your lead? Maybe not at this point, but you're playing, it's parallel play. You're playing next to them, but you're imitating what they're doing. So you're not going in with your own agenda. They are taking the lead, okay? So what can I learn now from this child, okay? I can learn where their play skills are. I can learn what does it take to even get them to maybe pay attention to me or to imitate me. So if I go in there and say, I'm going to build a garage, do they ever put their car in my garage, or do they continue to just go back and forth? If they continue to go back and forth, then maybe I'm just going to engage by going back and forth and making car sounds with them. But at this point, I'm just letting them know that I'm here. So let me show you another quick video about a teacher showing engagement. Nope. I have to stop. Sorry. Okay. I just get rid of all this. I did. Oh gosh. This is not my day. I'm sorry. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. See if you can hear it though.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So she's talking about this piece of engagement and getting to learn the kids.
Play is, I think at this age, everything. And in particular with students who have disabilities, really building that rapport with them is important. And so when I get a student, the first thing I do with them is play. I'm Jennifer Russell. I'm a PPCD teacher here at Beatty Elementary. When I meet a new child, the first thing I do is just watch close by. If they go to the block center and get the Legos, then I come and I sit next to them. At that point, the play is more just me kind of watching and narrating what's happening. Once I see what they're interested in, then I can join them in their play. And that may be me imitating them, doing what they're doing, building that rapport where they see that she's in on this. Okay, I got her. And when I'm playing with them, it'll become evident pretty clear what they know and what they don't know. If I say, give me, oh, give me the Lego. If they don't have the receptive language and the compliance, they're not going to give me that Lego. So I know right there, following directions is tricky for this person. Playing with them and assessing where they're at through play then helps me play with them with a purpose. So once I know what they don't know, then in play, I can start targeting what they need to know. And we start working on very specific skills. So I can have the coolest toy in the world and have a lesson planned out of, this is what I'm going to work on with this toy. But if they're not interested, you will get nothing. And you have to have the flexibility to be able to go where the child's going, quickly assess what can I do with this toy and work on that.
Okay. So she, as you see, she's following what they did. And the part that I really liked is, right, you can plan what you want, but if the child isn't interested, that little girl at the end, you're going to build no rapport. So you really want to meet the child where they are. So how do I do that? I have to individualize for each child. As you get to know the children, you begin to reflect on what you see in each child in order to really know and to really build a relationship, right? So just because that one child takes the car and goes back and forth like that, it does not mean every child with autism, that's how I'm going to start to build a rapport with them. You know that, but I'm giving that example. I've got to meet the child where they are. Sometimes we have to stop and really look at what does that child need in order to learn. So the big thing I want to take is we're really looking at, so what did I learn sensory wise? When I put my hand on that child's shoulder, did they go like this? Okay, well then there's no soft touching for this child. What I learned about their communication needs, you know, when I asked them a question, did they answer in one word answers? Did they stop and look at me? Did they maybe just hand me the thing and not even look at me? This is all the information you have to gather in order to establish a relationship. And we now have like, sort of, they call it an access point, a place that we know I can reach this child. And of course, some are easier than others. The other thing is, and we do this in the beginning of the year, we want to engage the family in this relationship, right? You want to build a relationship with all of your families, but those hard to reach kids are really the ones that you need the help of the family. Now, I know in early childhood, we have families that are still in some denial, right? But we do have other families that are really on top of things and have really learned a lot from their child. So we want that information. We want to take the time to connect with that family and gather that information from the family. So in the chat, if you can tell me, how do you do that with the families, or share, you can even unmute if you'd like, share about that kind of connection you made with a family that really gave you some useful information to establish a relationship and engagement with that child. Anybody have a success story?
This Penny. So, as a school social worker, I have to complete the social developmental studies with the parents. And so that gives me an opportunity to learn a lot about the child, about the family and everything, and about the child's interests and all of that. So I'm able to immediately go in there and join the child at their interest level. If it's Spider-Man, if it's Paw Patrol or whatever, you know, have
Perfect.
those different things available for the child, you know, to engage with me and immediately, you know, join with them.
Right.
And so just by having all that information from the parent, it really makes building a relationship with the child and the parent that much easier.
Right. A lot of you are saying there's a family questionnaire, the developmental stuff, right? I used to send home a little thing in the beginning of the year, right? Because I'm aging myself, but when I was in the classroom, it was Thomas the Tank, right? But if you showed my son Thomas the Tank, he'd play with it for like a minute, but that was not his thing. Okay, so you would not have really drawn him in. But if the parent tells me, and like what Penny said, I have those things ready, right? That's the whole thing also. I want to have that ready. So either you have your little bag or you have them in the centers. And that's how I make that engagement. Perfect. Mary Jo asked the parent if there's something in particular they would like them to learn. That's always great. Mara, you said you're not allowed to talk to the families regarding their children. Where do you work? Because that's kind of hard, because we always say, Decatur, we always say that our parents, right, are the kids' first teachers, and they have so much information that they can share with us. So I hope that maybe you can at least send home a questionnaire to parents.
That's
So
a major barrier in building a relationship.
major.
Not being able to communicate.
Yeah, because besides that, you want the parent to trust you, because we're sharing information. We're asking parents then to do stuff at home. So it's very hard if we don't have communication with the parents. Oh, you mean you as the paraprofessional? Okay, all right. I think you still should be able to talk to parents, but the teacher can, I hope. Okay, you've now done this engagement. You've taken the time. It doesn't have to be long. The teacher can, yes. Okay, Mari, you had us all very, very nervous that there was no communication with parents. We feel better. You've taken the time to make a connection with the child, to engage with the child, to learn about the child. Now we have to take the time to reflect. And I do think this is the part, because you're juggling so many, wearing so many hats, juggling so many balls. This is the part I think we skip. We have to take the time to figure out, what did this information tell me about the kid? Okay. When I hear the child doesn't play or he's just thinking, I have to take the time to reflect. And what did I really learn? Okay, so people can say my little Danny that I let cut paper and fall, he's stim. Yes, that was some type of stimming. But if you take away stimming, they're going to find something else. Guess what? Danny would listen when that paper was falling. That's what I learned, because the paraprofessional went over with Danny and she could say, why don't you cut some red paper now, Danny? And he would pick up red paper. So we learned, even though he was stimming by watching the paper fall, he was listening. So that was something that we reflected upon. We want to use this information that we got from the parents. We want to use the information that we get from specialists, right? So Penny talked about the information she gathers. I'm sure Penny's sharing that with the classroom teacher, and reflect on this information that we've gotten. Do you know more about the child's development? Do you know more about the child's sensory needs? Do you see strengths that you can build on? That's something that I want you to kind of find when you're engaging with this child. Where's sort of our entry point? And all children have some kind of strength, right? There's something, whatever they're gravitating to is some type of strength. What is the picture of the child that you're building kind of in your mind? That's what you're reflecting on. What is that child's interest? Okay, because those interests, this is like a big takeaway for today. Start with those kids' interests. That's what Penny was talking about. I don't care if they love Paw Patrol and that is the only way to engage them. You get some Paw Patrols and you add them to your centers. I know you're all going to say, what happens when Eckers comes in? You make that announcement. I added Paw Patrol because I know you will play and you will build I don't know a thing about Paw Patrol, but you will build a command center for the Paw Patrol and put them in there and put them to work. Okay, you explain why you have these added things. What the reflection part is, what does it tell me and how can I use this to work with the child and to teach the child? So when I made this connection with the child and we played for a couple 5-10 minute periods, again, they can be, for 1 week, you're going to spend some one-on-one 5 minutes a day with this child one-on-one. Take the time to stop and what did I learn? There's going to be some big aha moments, but there's going to be little things that you kind of have to reflect on. Again, focus on the child's strength. Focus on what you observe the child do. This is a big one. Focus on that child's sensory style. And I think you do this already, right? We learn about the kids that need deep pressure. We learn about the kid that needs a fidget to sit in any kind of large group, or even just to sit, right? They need to be holding something or kicking something or squirming on something. That's all the information. Start asking yourself questions. When we take the time to reflect, we're making a bridge between engagement and now getting ready for the planning part. We build relationships and we get to know the child. And then we can start coming up with goals and strategies. But if I'm coming up with goals and strategies, and I'm not talking about their IEP because you already have an IEP, but where am I going to start? What does this kid need for me to even start working on his goals? So think for a moment, what tools do you use to reflect? Okay, and how do you share this information? So if you can just chat, when you take the time to reflect, and I mean just in general, not even with this engagement cycle that I'm talking about. When you reflect and you share with your coworkers, how do you do that? What does that format look like? I don't know if people are typing or you don't know what I mean. So do you, we talk about it during team meetings. Yes. Large group meetings. Okay. Written something down and discuss it later. One-on-one conversation. Perfect. This is what I want. It can look in very different formats. And maybe the OT likes me to send her an email, but the PT likes to chat first thing in the morning. Collaboration with other preschool teachers. Thank you, Brandy. That's a really good one. What I'm noticing more when I go into schools also is now what's happening is there's the PFA blended program and there's the early childhood special ed over here. You guys need to be sharing ideas because that early childhood special ed teacher uses a lot of things that you can now start using in your classroom. They might have a different way to use visuals. So, right, not just sharing with the other specialists, but what about your other co-teachers? We have some paraprofessionals on here today. You need to be sharing this information with the paraprofessionals because now you created a relationship, you engaged this child, but there's other people that are in your classroom all the time, and you want them to be able to reach this child also. So take that time to reflect, take that time to share. And sometimes that reflecting happens as you're engaging with the child. Okay, so you might quickly say something to your paraprofessional, or you might make a connection yourself. So we've engaged with the child. We've oh my goodness, we've formed a relationship with that child. We've taken the time to stop and reflect, but now we're going to plan. What does all this information tell me about the child? And this is the step where you're going to figure out what does this child need in order to start learning, okay? I've made a connection with the child. I've figured out what this child needs in order to be engaged and also now to start learning. And what I'm going to do is this information that I gathered from engaging them, I'm going to use that to teach them skills. So all that information and that bond that I got, that's going to be my starting point. So when I'm starting to plan, I'm asking, how can my student learn in the classroom? How can the student be happy in the classroom? How can they be comfortable? How can they be an active member? Okay, and that's the big thing I want you to think about. So this child, you might have kids here, or I should say, this kid is out here, right? How can they still be out here, but be an active member of my classroom? How can I set things up? Okay, and it's all about being intentional. And then the cycle continues. As you reflect and you organize your material, you'll naturally begin to plan, and then you'll share this information. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the planning part that I just did. Sorry. Here's my cycle continues. Okay, you're going to know, what does the child like to play with? How do they like to be approached? Again, what kind of sensory needs do they have? And I didn't talk about this, but even in your planning, in your reflecting, we can think about how are we going to share this with the kids, right? So when I was in the classroom, I had a little girl that for a while till we figured out what was going on. When we said it's time to go home and get your coat on, she absolutely threw a tantrum, threw herself to the floor, and she was like a board. You couldn't even pick her up. We had to take the time to, well, first of all, we learned because she was going home to not a great situation. So we had to work on that. And I don't even remember now what our strategy was. I do remember we gave her some kind of visual, but we had to explain to the kids what was going on. We had to share this information, that she was safe, she was okay, and don't worry, we'll get her on the bus. So these are the kind of things that we're going to learn and share with the kids also, besides sharing with other people. So how are we doing? We're doing good. Okay, it's 5 o'clock. I'm going to send you to quick breakout rooms. I'm actually going to change the time. What I want you to do in your breakout room is just for short 3 minutes, share a time you built a relationship with a child and how you reflect. You know what? Let's not go to breakout rooms just because I'm scared about time. Does anybody read this? And can you think of a time where you built a relationship, you engaged a child, and then how you sort of made some adjustments to reach that child? Anybody want to share?
I can share. And this is I think this is one of the times where my professional development just kind of came into play with my own family. My granddaughter, she's a year old, and she has been really attached to her parents. And so when she would come to visit me, she would always scream and holler and just really be attached to her parents. And so I would never impose into her space. I would always just play with her from a distance, you know, just still giving her the opportunity to come to me. And so through time, I just kind of like, you know, let her be for the most part. I would still be in the room with her, but she was like really attached to her parents. So as she started to get a little older, this was when she was about maybe up until she turned about a year old. This is how her behavior was. So she would cry, you know, whenever they left the room. She was just really attached to them.
I had one of those kids.
So, you know, coming over to see me, you know, my son would bring her over like every week, but she was still this way. And I want to say maybe within the last past 3 months, because she just turned a year in November. So I want to say somewhere around January is when she actually came into my home and actually hugged me and gave me a kiss, and actually understood that, you know, she was safe with me and I'm her grandmother.
Right. So that's really, I'm glad, actually, I like that you related it to yourself, because I like to think about preschool like that, right? You are dropping a 3-year-old off, a 3-year-old off, a 4-year-old off at an unfamiliar place. And you're telling them to figure out the routine, right? So if you're using this information for the fall, think about when those kids come in. So it's so important to build that relationship. And the way you built a relationship with a kid that was nonverbal is you were in that room. So you became a familiar person. So even if you have that really hard to reach nonverbal child, just sitting in the center with that kid might be the place that you start to build that relationship. Monica, that's a perfect example. Perfect example. Right, building relations. Okay, a sand timer for when the kid leaves. Building relationship with your kids outside the classroom at a community event, if you happen to see them. But I think kids freak out when they see the teacher like not in the classroom. Okay, but has anybody had that new kid? Like, even did anybody get a new kid after spring break? And you're at that building relationship stage? Too. So I went to a classroom, and this was more in the fall, and there was a little boy sitting in circle in his cube chair, and he was crying and he was crying and he was talking to the assistant that was sitting by him, but I couldn't tell if like how his language was. And the teacher did a great job. She did a great job continuing on, but she really wasn't trying to engage him. I was a little concerned about that, but she told me that this was only his 3rd day of school, and he was sort of still learning the routine. So in that way, I feel like they were giving him safety, like they were getting him up to circle. He wasn't quite in circle yet, but this is the routine that we're going to do every morning. You're safe because there's someone by you. They gave him a fidget. I don't know if, well, he chose the fidget. They walked up with a basket and they let him choose a fidget. So that's another example of just starting to make that connection with the child. All right, so in our last half hour, 25 minutes, we're now going to make that shift to the engagement where I'm talking about each and every child is an active member in the classroom, right? They are participating in the classroom activities. Again, it's not enough just to be in the classroom. I want you learning in my classroom. So by now you've established a relationship with the child, you know what they like and what you don't like, and you're going to start at the child's level and you're going to work on getting them engaged. So this is again from the pyramid model, and I really like this because think about some of your lower children. There's actually 4 levels of engagement. There's 4 ways I can show you that I am engaged. The first way is just watching, right? So I don't say a word, but I am looking at you, okay? I'm watching what's being done by you. I'm watching my peers. I'm taking it in. And I'm sure you can all think of those watchers. And even the little boy that I was talking about at the beginning in Jennifer's class, he sort of like went around and watched what the other kids were doing. So I could say in the first 10 minutes of class, he really was engaged because I think he was figuring out where he was going to go, but he was watching. He kind of went into each center or watched from the middle. The second level of engagement is this motor. So a child observes the behavior or the activity and they learn by observation, and then they begin to follow along physically. Okay, so I've been watching and then I start to join in. The third level, which is a little higher, is verbally. I can verbally participate in the activity. So I'm singing, maybe in large group. I'm in dramatic play, and I'm the one that says, we're going to make soup for lunch today. And then the highest level is a combination of all. I can watch, I can participate, I'm talking. So think about your 7 to 10, your 7-10 split child. Maybe they are engaged because they're watching. So maybe they sit at large group and they don't sing. They're not at the verbal stage, but they are sitting there and watching you the whole time. That child is engaged. Now, we don't want kids to stay at that level the whole time, but that is a place that they can start, and let's make note of that. The other thing is we need to give children the opportunity to participate at any level in order, or I'm sorry, we need to give them the opportunity to engage at any level that they're at again. So I'm thinking about large group, I'm thinking about centers time. If I'm at that lower level and it's the beginning of the year, or who was it? Brandy said she just got two new kids at the end of middle of April. Pretty unlikely that kid is going to jump right into centers on the, 3rd day back to school and be the one starting what they're going to do in dramatic play, giving a suggestion that we can play doctor, for example. Those kids might just be watching for the first week. They're figuring out how this classroom works. Okay, go back to Monica and her little granddaughter, right? We're taking 3-year-olds and throwing them into a classroom. Now you're taking a kid where a bunch of kids already are in a routine, right? And we're asking them to join into the routine. So I really like this. Again, this is from the pyramid model. So offer these different opportunities for kids to engage. So when I have maybe a nonverbal child at large group, make sure that child is watching. Again, I keep saying this, don't sit them in the back in their cube chair. Maybe they should be in their cube chair right next to you. Or do they have to sit in a cube chair? I went into a great classroom where there was a cube chair. A kid was sitting on like a kidney bouncy thing, and another one was on the floor in a squishy thing. We all sometimes go right to those cube chairs, okay? So think about these 4 levels. And again, you want to offer many opportunities so kids can show you that they're participating and that they can be engaged in the conversation, in the activity. So if I'm not at the verbal level, how can I still participate and be engaged? The other thing is this is again, still from the pyramid model. They have some really good stuff on engagement. Your environment has to promote engagement, okay? So if I'm in your classroom, do I know what I am supposed to do? So do I know when I get off the bus and walk down the hall, how do I know what the morning routine is? Think about this for a minute. How do kids know what the morning routine is in your classroom? Did you go over it all the time when they first came in? Did you and your assistant walk the kids through? Do you have some visuals? Is there a child that still has an individual schedule that tells him what to do? The other thing is, how do kids know that they're making progress? So do the kids know the steps they need to do to complete an activity? So do the kids know if they go to the art center, they can take any art material, and when they're done, do they know where they put their done piece of artwork? Do they know what they do with the materials? Again, this is all ways I can be engaged. If I don't know, so again, think about your brand new child. All the other kids now know the routine in the classroom, but am I helping that new child learn the routine? And that knowing that routine allows me to be engaged. How do I know when the task is completed? Okay, this increases participation because children learn that there's an end when they complete the steps. So how do I know when center time is over? How do you let me know? Do you flash the lights? Do you sing a song? Does everybody have a certain job? And then this is a big one. This is a big one to keep a child engaged. Do I know what I do next? So that's our transitions. How do kids know in your classroom what to do next? So take a moment to think about this stuff. And if you would put in the chat, answer one of these questions. How do kids know in your classroom what they're supposed to do? How do they know if they've done it? A routine, right? You have lots of routines in your classroom, okay? Picture schedule, perfect. We have a picture schedule and we refer to the picture schedule. The teacher says it's time to stop, but maybe we add some visuals. First then, perfect, right. Some of those kids might need some first then. Picture schedules. The same song plays, okay, great. I turn off a light and sing a song. Great. So think about that new child or that 7 to 10 split child. Can they answer these questions? Do they know what they are supposed to do? And if a lot of you said that you have routines or you're doing the same time, if that child is not picking up on that routine and they're not engaged, what do you need to do? Do they need an individual schedule? Do they need more visuals? I think we do this, but I just want to remind, in order to get a child engaged, we need to focus on their strengths and their preferences, okay? We need to let that child adjust to get into the classroom, and we need to sort of see the challenges that maybe the child is having, right? So maybe that new child that started after spring break, after a week, maybe that middle child has picked up on the routine and they really are kind of flowing through and they're engaged in the classroom. But maybe there's a child that's still not engaged. Yes, Mary Jo, stop and walk that child through the routine. You might have to stop, meet that child in the bus and say, now remember, when we get into the classroom, this is what we do. Or to help you remember, I put up some pictures on your cubby. So, and this makes the child more independent, right? On your locker, there's the 4 things you're going to do when you come into the classroom. So work on that child's strengths, for example, if they're visual, and then also their preferences, okay? Teach them each routine. Yes, yes. Ask another child to model. That's a great one, Cindy. I've seen that with asking a child to sort of be their play partner for centers. That's a great way to get a new child engaged. Or also that child, that IEP child, your blended child. Will you be Becky's play partner today? Will you play with Becky in and you let one of them pick which center? So all great ideas. Okay, now hopefully this is going to start show, because this is a great video on engaging during centers. It's a few short clips showing kids not engaged and how the teacher engaged them.
Yeah. Wants to break. Sorry, let's start over. Let's start. So, here you go.
Ay, qué bonito, ¿qué hizo ahí? ¿Qué hizo? Ya. Abajo. Vamos a hacerlo así, mira. 5 patitos que conocí, flacos, gordos amarillos, yo los vi. A ver, ahora tú. 5 patitos que conocí, flacos, gordos amarillos, yo los vi. Pero el patito con la colita de pluma, y ahora nosotros con su cuac, 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 cuac.
You have your name, so what center are you going to now? Science, let's look and see. We have Kaden, Josiah, and Kanija. It looks like we're full right now. We can go to writing. You love writing. Or we can go to blocks. You like to build. Or we can go to library because you like to read. Which one would you like to go to? Would like to go to writing? Perfect. That's Antonio's. Great. All right.
Family picture is either in the science area or in the book area. See? Ooh, lots of food. Mm. Ooh, delicious. Cut the pineapple first. There you go. Corn. Look, this is how I eat my corn.
All right, so I like that video. We're skipping the breakout rooms because we're running out of time. I like that video because did the teacher, any of those teachers, have to spend more than 2 minutes to get the child engaged? No. So you've got that radar. When we see a child not engaged, if we can catch it quickly, we can get them engaged very easily and learn, be able to learn, right? So that little boy was practically done with that puzzle. He couldn't get the last piece and he pushed it away, but the teacher was able to jump in and get him to be engaged and to finish what he needed to do. So this is from a book we have in our library, Engaging Every Child in the Preschool Classroom. I think we do a lot of these, but again, just go back and think about it, okay? We've talked a lot about room arrangement already. If the child is hard to teach to their interest again, right? Have you thought about how all children can participate? Are your adaptations in place? Are they ready to go? If activities or materials aren't interesting, simply rotating activities, the kids think it's new. Even if you had it out in September, it becomes new and exciting. I think that this is important. What are you trying? You have to know what you're trying to get the child to learn. So are you set up and are you doing those embedded learning activities so we have a goal-directed behavior that we're working for? Okay, they're not going to learn if you're not setting it up. They're not going to be engaged and able to demonstrate knowledge if you haven't set up that learning opportunity for them. Point out to children the tasks that they can independently do, right? So we could remind that child, you did that puzzle the other day. Remember what you did in order to finish that puzzle? Use types, and the last point is using some kind of planning matrix, again, because you have a lot of kids that you're responsible for, but thinking about that kid that you feel like isn't making progress or that you need to be a little bit more focused for in order for that child to be engaged, write it out on a matrix. Look at that child's objective and say, where are there natural times during my day, during the routines, that this child could demonstrate this skill? And set it up so that child has the opportunity to demonstrate that skill for you. The last thing I want to share, and this is on, you got an additional link of a Word document that has a bunch of links on it. This is from Early Choices. They have this 100 ways to adapt. So it's all there for you. A lot of these we do already, but it's just good to have it out there and to remember, because sometimes we think about, so how can I adapt? And again, you're adapting to get that child engaged. I can't show you what I learned, I can't show you my knowledge if I'm not engaged in the classroom and participating in the classroom. And then I think we're all familiar with this also, but this is our prompting hierarchy. And I like to look at it as a ladder, right? I'm trying to move my check out of the way. There's two ways, and no child is the same. I can go from least restrictive prompt, so starting with the least amount and working down to giving them more. So visual didn't work. Do I need to give them a verbal prompt? Do I need to give them a gestural? Or I can start with the most and fade it away. So it's just what you think works for a child, but there's all different ways to prompt and support a child. So if I give them a visual cue, are they able to be engaged and demonstrate knowledge? Not enough with that visual. Do they need a visual and a verbal cue? Or are they more of a verbal child? Do they need a gestural cue? Do they need me to model for them? So kind of knowing all these things so we don't get stuck. We're all into visuals, which are great, but some children need more than visuals, right? They might need that verbal cue of me pointing to the visual. So I like that. This is from the autismhelper.com. But I think sometimes we don't know where to start, or sometimes we offer that full, we start at the top and we offer that hand over hand, but are we fading? And again, share this with your paraprofessionals, right? We only want to offer the amount of support so the child can demonstrate knowledge, be engaged in activities, and then we want to fade that support away. So I did it. In the last 4 minutes, I want you to reflect for a moment. And so we talked about 2 types of engagement, right? We talked about engagement, establishing a connection, a relationship with a child so you know where to begin your teaching. And then we talked about making everybody an active member in your classroom. So we're not going to do all this, but pick one of these. And in the chat box, I'd like you to type, is there something that was like, oh my God, I'm going to try that tomorrow? Is there something bigger that maybe you want to try next month? Or is there something even bigger that you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this to start off in August? So take a moment to reflect and go ahead and type what you've learned and how you're going to make a change in your classroom. Engage from the beginning with each child. Great, so building that relationship. More observation on how students are engaging. Right, so take that step back. Remember the 4 ways I can engage. Mindful about the levels of engagement. Yeah, that was a real aha for me when I heard that in a presentation. Oh no, medical leave and you're moving to 1st grade, building relationships. And again, someone said with every child, some kids are you're naturally going to build a relationship, but I'm talking about those hard to reach children that we want to get engaged. Play for 5 minutes with one child, right? Spend more time engaging with one specific student. Okay, great. Okay, and doing some parallel play instead of you jumping in and implementing. Spending more time playing. Take 5 minutes to step back to see my 7-10 kids, right? Now our 7-10 kids are going to be our middle kids. All right, well, thank you. Listen more, talk less. Great. Thank you so much. I hope you found this helpful. Marianne, I'm a little concerned because I don't see our recording thing.
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, it is? Okay, you can stop.
I have one request. I mean,
Oh.
should we unrecord? Should we-
Yeah, stop recording. Where do you see recording?
Up on the thing here.
Okay, can you press stop?